Did you know that clutching your money in fear is actually a spiritual sin that blocks God's abundance from reaching you? Right now, you might be holding tight to every dollar, afraid to spend, convinced that saving will protect you. But what if I told you that this very fear is the invisible wall keeping wealth away from your life? Florence Scovel Shinn discovered a profound truth that challenges everything you were taught about money. She revealed that the universe operates on circulation, not stagnation. When you hoard money out of fear, you send a powerful signal to the divine mind that you don't trust the source of all supply. You're essentially saying, I'm alone in this, and God can't provide for me again. Here's what's really happening. Every time you refuse to spend money you actually need to spend, you're not being wise. You're practicing poverty consciousness. You're treating abundance like a scarce resource instead of recognizing it as an infinite flow from universal substance. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you why the Bible itself warns against this mentality. You'll discover the metaphysical law that Florence Scovel Shinn taught, which transforms spending from a fearful act into a spiritual practice of faith. And you'll learn exactly how to break free from the financial fear that's been disguising itself as wisdom in your mind. This isn't about reckless spending. This is about understanding the divine circulation that brings wealth into your hands and keeps it flowing. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn will completely transform your relationship with money. Let me tell you why you haven't experienced the financial freedom you desire. It's not because you don't work hard enough. It's not because opportunities don't exist. The real problem is invisible, and it lives in your consciousness. You've been taught that saving money is always virtuous and spending is dangerous. Your parents probably said, save for a rainy day and don't waste your money. These beliefs seemed wise on the surface, but they planted seeds of fear in your subconscious mind. Now, every time you need to invest in yourself, purchase something important, or circulate money back into the economy, you feel guilt and anxiety instead of faith and freedom. This is what Florence Scovel Shinn called the poverty consciousness. It's a mental and spiritual state where you see lack instead of abundance, danger instead of opportunity, and scarcity instead of infinite supply. When you operate from this consciousness, you actually magnetize the very poverty you're trying to avoid. Think about your own life right now. How many times have you denied yourself something you truly needed because you were afraid the money wouldn't come back? How often have you said, I can't afford it, when what you really meant was, I don't trust that more money will come? Every single time you made that choice, you were practicing the vibration of lack. Here's the spiritual paradox that Florence Scovel Shinn taught. The person who fears spending money is actually living in poverty, even if their bank account looks healthy. True wealth is a state of consciousness first and a bank balance second. When you hoard money because you're afraid, you're not wealthy. You're imprisoned by fear, wearing the mask of security. The Bible itself speaks directly to this condition. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 24 says, "One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give, and only suffers want." Read that again, slowly. The person who gives and spends with wisdom actually becomes richer, while the person who withholds out of fear becomes poor. This isn't just moral teaching. This is describing a metaphysical law of circulation. Florence Scovel Shinn explained this principle through what she called the law of use. She taught that everything in the universe must be used to be increased. A muscle that isn't used atrophies. A talent that isn't practiced disappears. And money that isn't circulated stagnates and eventually diminishes in its power to bless your life. You see this law operating everywhere in nature. Rivers that flow stay fresh and alive. Ponds that don't move become stagnant and filled with decay. Your financial life operates by the exact same principle. When money flows through your hands with trust and wisdom, it stays fresh and returns to you multiplied. When you grip it in fear, refusing to let it move, it stagnates in your consciousness and your experience. The real poverty isn't having less money in your account today. The real poverty is the fearful belief that there isn't more where that came from. When you believe that the money in your hand right now is all there is, you're denying the infinite nature of divine supply. You're treating God's abundance like it's a limited pie instead of recognizing it as an eternal fountain. Florence Scovel Shinn witnessed this principle transform countless lives during her practice as a metaphysical teacher in New York. One of her most powerful examples involved a woman who came to her in desperate financial circumstances. This woman had been saving every penny for years, living in constant fear and deprivation, and yet her financial situation only grew worse. Florence Scovel Shinn recognized immediately what was happening. The woman's fear of spending had created an energetic dam in her financial life. She was so focused on holding on to what little she had that she had closed herself off to receiving more. Her consciousness was screaming, "I don't have enough," and the universe was simply responding to that declaration by giving her experiences that matched her belief. Florence Scovel Shinn gave her a radical instruction. She told the woman to go out and spend money on something she truly desired but had been denying herself. The woman was terrified, but she trusted the teaching. She went out and purchased a beautiful hat she had been wanting for months. It seemed frivolous and frightening to her fearful mind. But here's what happened next. Within days of making that purchase, an unexpected check arrived in her mail. Someone owed her money from years ago and suddenly remembered to pay her. Then a new opportunity for income appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. The woman had broken the consciousness of fear and lack. By spending with faith instead of hoarding with fear, she had opened the channel for abundance to flow into her life. Florence Scovel Shinn explained it this way in her book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. She said, "Man must prepare for the thing he has asked for when there isn't the slightest sign of it." This is where most people fail. They look at their bank account, see a small number, and make all their decisions from fear of that number decreasing. But divine supply doesn't work that way. She taught that every time you spend money in faith, trusting that more will come, you're making a declaration to the universe. You're saying, "I believe in infinite abundance. I trust the source of my supply. I know that this isn't the last money I'll ever receive." That declaration is heard by divine mind and answered with manifestation. Another powerful story Florence Scovel Shinn shared involved a man who received an intuitive nudge to give away a significant sum of money to someone in need. His logical mind screamed no. His fear told him to hold tight. But he had been studying her teachings, and he understood the law of circulation. He gave the money in faith. Within the week, he received a business opportunity that brought him 10 times what he had given away. But more importantly, his consciousness had shifted. He was no longer living in fear of loss. He had stepped into the awareness of infinite supply. From that day forward, money flowed to him with greater ease because he had proven to himself that circulation brings increase. Florence Scovel Shinn constantly emphasized this truth. She said the imaging faculty plays a leading part in the game of life. What you imagine with faith becomes your experience. When you imagine lack and hold your money in fear, you create more lack. When you imagine abundance and let money flow with wisdom and trust, you create more abundance. This is where the fear of spending becomes a spiritual sin. Sin, in its original meaning, doesn't just mean moral wrongdoing. It means missing the mark. When you fear spending, you miss the mark of faith. You deny the nature of God as infinite supply. You treat the divine source as if it were limited, as if it could run out, as if it needed your anxious protection. Jesus Christ himself taught this principle repeatedly. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6, verse 38, he said, "Give, and it will be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over will be put into your lap." This isn't just about charitable giving. This is describing the fundamental law of circulation that governs all abundance. Florence Scovel Shinn took these ancient teachings and translated them into practical metaphysical principles for modern life. She showed that this isn't about spending recklessly or foolishly. It's about spending from a consciousness of abundance rather than a consciousness of fear. There's a massive difference. Now let me show you the exact spiritual mechanism that makes this work. Florence Scovel Shinn called it the law of use, but it's inseparable from what she also taught as the law of faith in action. Here's the core principle that will transform everything. The universe responds not to your words, but to your consciousness. Your consciousness is revealed not by what you say, but by what you do. When you hoard money in fear, your action is declaring, "I believe in scarcity." When you spend money with wisdom and trust, your action is declaring, "I believe in abundance." The universe must respond to your declaration. This is why affirmations alone don't create wealth. You can say, "I am prosperous" 1,000 times, but if you're clutching every dollar in fear, your actions are affirming the opposite. Your subconscious mind and the divine mind both respond to what you truly believe, and what you truly believe is shown by what you do. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that money is God in manifestation. It's not evil. It's not separate from spirit. It's simply universal substance taking a physical form that allows for exchange and circulation. When you understand this, you realize that fearing money or fearing its movement is actually fearing the manifestation of God's supply. The remedy is to practice faithful circulation. This means you spend money when you genuinely need to spend it, without fear, trusting completely that divine mind will replenish and multiply your supply. You don't spend foolishly. You don't spend to impress others or to fill emotional voids. You spend with intention, wisdom, and most importantly, with faith. Let me give you the exact steps Florence Scovel Shinn would prescribe. First, you must identify where fear is controlling your financial decisions. Ask yourself right now, where am I holding back from spending money I should spend because I'm afraid? Maybe it's investing in your education. Maybe it's buying quality tools for your work. Maybe it's contributing to a cause you believe in. Wherever fear is present, that's where the block exists. Second, you must reframe spending as a spiritual practice of trust. Before you make a purchase that feels scary to your fearful mind, pause and affirm, "I spend this money in complete faith that divine mind is my source and my supply is infinite. I trust that as I circulate money wisely, more flows to me multiplied." This shifts your consciousness from fear to faith in the moment. Third, you must release the outcome. This is where most people stumble. They spend in faith, but then they anxiously watch their bank account, wondering when the money will return. That anxiety cancels out the faith. True circulation means you release the money completely, trusting that divine intelligence knows the perfect timing and method for its return. Florence Scovel Shinn gave a powerful affirmation for this principle. She said, "I spend money freely and fearlessly, knowing my supply is endless and immediate." Feel those words. Freely means without guilt or anxiety. Fearlessly means trusting the source completely. Endless means you recognize abundance as infinite. Immediate means you don't worry about timing. The law of use states that whatever you use with faith expands. Whatever you withhold in fear contracts. This applies to money, talents, love, and every form of good in your life. When you use money in faith, spending where divine intelligence guides you to spend, that money must return to you increased because you've aligned with the law of circulation. Here's the deep metaphysical truth Florence Scovel Shinn understood. The physical money in your wallet is not your supply. It's simply the current manifestation of your supply. Your real supply is the infinite reservoir of universal substance that responds to your consciousness. As long as you maintain a consciousness of abundance and trust, that reservoir will continue manifesting as physical money through countless channels. This is why people who hoard money often lose it unexpectedly. Unexpected expenses appear. Investments fail. Something breaks and needs replacement. The universe is not punishing them. The universe is simply responding to their consciousness of fear and lack. What you fear, you attract. What you expect with faith, you receive. Jesus demonstrated this principle perfectly with the parable of the talents found in Matthew chapter 25. The servants who used their talents, who circulated them and put them to work, saw those talents multiply. The servant who buried his talent in fear, who refused to use it because he was afraid of losing it, had even that taken away from him. This parable isn't about punishment. It's about the law of use. The servant who buried his talent in fear was practicing the consciousness of lack. He saw his master as harsh and limited. He acted from fear instead of faith. And the natural consequence of that consciousness was loss. Florence Scovel Shinn would say that servant represents everyone who hoards money in fear. You're burying your talent. You're refusing to let it circulate and grow. And the natural spiritual consequence is that your financial life stagnates or even diminishes because you've closed the channel of supply with your fear. The remedy is always the same. Shift your consciousness from fear to faith. Recognize divine mind as your source. Trust the infinite nature of supply. And then act from that trust by spending wisely when you're called to spend, giving generously when you're called to give, and investing boldly when you're called to invest. Let me show you how this ancient metaphysical principle applies to your modern financial life right now. You're living in a world that constantly preaches fear-based financial advice. Save for emergencies. Don't spend on anything unnecessary. Cut back everywhere you can. While some practical savings has its place, this advice becomes spiritually dangerous when it's motivated by fear rather than wisdom. Emmet, one of the great metaphysical teachers who studied alongside Florence Scovel Shinn's work, taught about the mental equivalent. He explained that you cannot have anything in your physical experience that you don't first have as a mental equivalent in your consciousness. If you want wealth in your bank account, you must first build wealth consciousness in your mind. Here's where most people get trapped. They look at their current financial situation and make all their decisions based on what they currently have. They say, I only have $1,000, so I must hold tight to all of it. But that statement and that action are building the mental equivalent of poverty, not wealth. You're affirming limitation as your reality. A person with wealth consciousness thinks differently. They look at that same $1,000 and say, this is my current manifestation, but my true supply is infinite. I will use this money wisely as divine intelligence guides me, trusting completely that more is already on its way to me. That consciousness creates a completely different financial experience. Let me give you a practical modern example. Imagine you need to invest in education or training that costs $500. Your bank account has $1,000. Your fearful mind immediately says, no, that's half of everything I have. But your faithful mind says this investment will increase my value, my skills, and my earning potential. Divine mind will replenish this money and increase my supply. Which choice creates wealth? The fearful choice keeps you stuck at your current level. You save the $500, but you also save your limitation. The faithful choice might temporarily reduce your balance, but it increases your capacity to receive. And when you act from faith, divine intelligence begins arranging circumstances to multiply your return. Catherine Ponder, another profound teacher of prosperity principles, emphasized what she called prosperous thinking. She taught that you must think prosperity to demonstrate prosperity. Every time you think thoughts of fear, lack, or limitation about money, you're creating poverty consciousness. Every time you think thoughts of abundance, trust, and infinite supply, you're creating wealth consciousness. This is where spending becomes a spiritual practice. When you spend money that you genuinely need to spend, doing so with faith instead of fear, you're practicing prosperous thinking in action. You're training your consciousness to operate from abundance rather than scarcity. Here's a powerful exercise Florence Scovel Shinn would prescribe for you right now. Think of one area where you've been withholding money out of fear. Maybe it's buying better quality food for your health. Maybe it's investing in your appearance because you feel it's vain. Maybe it's contributing to a spiritual community or cause you believe in. Identify that one area. Now ask yourself this question. Is my withholding truly wisdom, or is it fear disguised as wisdom? Real wisdom feels peaceful and clear. Fear feels tight, anxious, and constricting. If you feel that tightness, that's fear, and it's blocking your good. Make a commitment today to spend that money in faith, not recklessly, not foolishly, but intentionally, with a prayer of faith, trusting that divine mind will replenish your supply. As you make that purchase, affirm out loud or silently, "I release this money in complete faith," knowing that as it circulates, it returns to me multiplied and increased. Then here's the critical part. Release all anxiety about when or how the money returns. Don't check your bank account obsessively. Don't worry about next week. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that worry is inverted faith. When you worry, you're using your imagination to create negative outcomes. When you trust, you're using your imagination to align with divine good. Louise Hay, who carried forward many of these prosperity principles, created a powerful affirmation that supports this practice. She taught people to say, "I prosper wherever I turn, and I know that I deserve prosperity of all kinds." This affirmation builds the mental equivalent of wealth. It declares to your subconscious and to universal mind that prosperity is your natural state. Combine this affirmation with faithful circulation. As you spend money wisely, affirm, "I prosper wherever I turn." As you receive money, affirm, "I know that I deserve prosperity of all kinds." You're retraining your entire consciousness to operate from abundance rather than fear. Here's what will begin to happen in your experience. First, opportunities you never noticed before will suddenly appear. They were always there, but your fear-based consciousness couldn't perceive them. As you shift to faith-based consciousness, your perception opens. Second, unexpected income will begin flowing to you from surprising sources. An old debt gets repaid, a refund arrives, a gift appears, a new client finds you. These aren't coincidences. This is divine mind responding to your changed consciousness. Third, your relationship with money will transform from anxiety to peace. You'll stop obsessing over every dollar because you'll know in your core that your supply is infinite. This inner peace is actually the greatest wealth of all. Let me bring all of this together into one clear metaphysical resolution. The fear of spending money is a spiritual error because it denies the infinite nature of divine supply. When you clutch money in fear, you're declaring that God cannot provide for you again. You're treating abundance as limited when it's actually eternal and inexhaustible. Florence Scovel Shinn revealed that true prosperity is a state of consciousness before it's a bank balance. The person who has money but lives in fear of losing it is spiritually poor. The person who has less money but lives in complete faith and trust in divine supply is spiritually wealthy. And spiritual wealth always eventually manifests as physical wealth when consciousness remains steady. The biblical principle found in Proverbs chapter 11, verse 24, isn't just ancient wisdom. It's a metaphysical law that's operating in your life right now. One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give, and only suffers want. This law of circulation demands that you release money in faith to receive money in abundance. Jesus Christ taught this same principle when he spoke of giving and receiving in pressed down, shaken together, running over measure. He understood that the universe operates on flow, not stagnation. He demonstrated faith by feeding thousands from a few loaves and fishes. He trusted divine provision completely, and that trust manifested miracles. You have that same power available to you right now, not because you're divine in yourself, but because you have access to divine mind through faith. When you spend money that needs to be spent, doing so with complete trust in infinite intelligence, you activate the law of circulation. You open the channel for abundance to flow into your life from sources you cannot currently imagine. This isn't about reckless spending. This isn't about buying things to fill emotional voids or to impress other people. This is about responding to genuine needs and divine guidance with faith instead of fear. It's about recognizing that every act of faithful circulation is a prayer in action, a declaration that you trust the source of all good. The practical conclusion is simple but profound. Starting today, identify one area where fear has been controlling your financial decisions. Make a choice to spend money in that area with wisdom and faith. As you do, affirm that your supply is infinite and that divine mind is already arranging the perfect replenishment and increase. Then, release all anxiety about the outcome. Trust the process. Know that as you align your consciousness with abundance and your actions with faith, your entire financial experience must transform. This is law. This is truth. This is the teaching that Florence Scovel Shinn gave to thousands and that transformed their lives completely. If you felt the truth of these words resonating in your spirit, then you're ready to go deeper into these prosperity principles. Subscribe to Florence Scovel Decoded right now, because we're building a community of people who are done living in financial fear and ready to step into the abundance that's their spiritual birthright. Every video on this channel will give you more tools, more understanding, and more power to manifest the prosperous life you deserve. Hit that subscribe button and join thousands of others who are learning to think like Florence Scovel Shinn, to trust like the great metaphysical masters, and to receive the infinite good that divine mind has already prepared for them. Your next breakthrough is waiting in the next video. And remember these final words from Florence Scovel Shinn herself, words that should guide every financial decision you make from this moment forward. She said there is a supply for every demand. Never look at the things that are, but at the things you desire. Pour your attention upon the invisible, and the invisible becomes visible. Go now in faith. Circulate your good. Trust your source. And watch as the windows of heaven open in your financial life.